Oh, yeah, too many conversations. Unbelievable. Look at you networking. All right, so if you're in the back, if you would, don't mind, come on forward. This Les is somebody who is very interactive, so you're going to find that being up and close and in the splash zone is the place to be. For those of you who don't know, my name is David Ochi. I'm the Interim Director of New Ventures here at Applied Innovation. First of all, welcome. Thank you to all of you for coming. One of the things for sure we want to make mention of is, do you see that wonderful lady in the back, Esma here? Wave. Give us what is that? Give us a big wave. Everyone say hi to Esma. Oh, come on. What are you guys eating lethargic pizza or something? Jeezy peasy. All right, so Esma is with Stradling. Stradling is a wonderful law firm in Newport that is sponsoring this event. So I think at minimum they deserve, along with Azad. Azad was here. I saw him. Where did he go? Where's Azad? He's gone. All right, well, let's give Esma a round of applause and thank Stradling for all the work that they've done for us. So today, we have a wonderful speaker that has a very controversial title, I guess. It sounds like it came straight from the White House, actually, who's going to be talking to you about some real tactical what works and doesn't work and some of the startup stuff. He's got an amazing background that I'm frankly going to let him get into because I'll butcher it. So would you please give a warm round of applause to Les Trachtman.
Thanks, David. So it is 12:05. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thanks for coming. So first, a couple of logistical things. Hopefully, all of you have registered. I know you've got your badges on. And if you have registered and you stay till the end of the program, we're going to give away 2 copies of my book, 2 different people. And I'll even sign them if you'd like. And we're going to pick them randomly from the names that have registered. So stick around till the end. Must be here. Must be present to win. So that's your inducement to listen to me the whole rest of the time. So again, thank you for coming. I first want to introduce myself a little bit differently than having any relationship to the White House. Seems like there's a lot of people in Washington these days that are trying to distance themselves from the White House. And I live not that far from the White House. I live in Annapolis, Maryland. And we get some of the fallout that happens from there. But I figured I'd have to bring up at least one White House joke today. So that's it. My claim to fame, so I'm an entrepreneur. And I've been a second CEO. That's not my phone. Maybe that's the White House calling. Wasn't me. I didn't do it. I've been a second CEO 6 times. And the reason I've been a second CEO 6 times is I'm not smart enough to be a first CEO. And so I take over from a founder CEO and try to help that person, he or she, scale their company. I'm not an academic researcher. I really don't like research that much. I'm just a keen observer. And I observe things that I see as I do them, as I've worked through them. And then I try to put together patterns, try to understand what's really going on. And what I've found, and the reason I wrote this book, is that there are clear patterns. There are very distinctive patterns that happen in almost every founding situation. Some of you may have run through some of these yourself, and you might hear some things that are familiar to you. But my goal of writing the book was to help people like myself who come into situations, either founders, successors, investors, board members, executives, who come into situations like this and try to help them avoid some of the mistakes, some of the stumbles that I've made along the way. Now, I know in the audience there are a few people that I know pretty well, know me pretty well, and they know of all the stumbles that I've made. I only talk about a few of them in the book, but if you can seek out those people who actually know me, they'll probably tell you the rest of them as well. In any case, the only other distinguishing factor that I have in my career, or maybe in my life, and for those of you who have read my book, you might actually know this, but I was a classmate of Dee Snider. Okay, so there's some young people in the audience probably don't know who Dee Snider is. So anybody know who Dee Snider is? Duke Snider. Well, he's a little older Duke than Dee Snider. Yeah. Twisted Sister. So Dee Snider, Twisted Sister, was a classmate of mine the same year that I was in high school, in a little school in New York. And the real distinction is that my hair was longer than Dee Snider's at the time. So that's the only credibility that I have. That and I wrote a book now. In any case, we're going to talk about some of the things that are in the book, but more of this is geared at those of you who are in the entrepreneurial world. So first, if you can help me out a little bit, how many of you in the audience are founders or aspiring founders of companies? Raise your hands, please. A bunch of you. Great. So I tend to disparage people when I speak in audiences like this, but for founders, I think founders actually do magic. Founders do things that most mere mortal human beings like me cannot do. So I have a very healthy respect for founders. So thank you for coming here if you're a founder. How about people who provide financing for startups? Any people here in the audience for that? Okay. A few of you as well. Boards of directors, any of you serve on boards of directors of early stage companies? A few of you as well. Okay. So I'm an equal opportunity disparager. Other than founders, I will disparage all of you during this conversation today. And you can come back and disparage me as well. I'm okay with that. So we're going to talk about a few things, but of course, no presentation starts out right when you talk to entrepreneurs than to talk about money, right? All of you who have startup ventures probably are looking for money, either money to invest in your company or money that you're going to generate from revenue. And there's some interesting things that happen with money in the entrepreneurial world. And they're not all very obvious. At least they weren't obvious to me when I started out. So the first thing that you need to know about money is there's a lot of it out there. There's really a lot of it out there. Now, those of you who are founders are kind of looking at me right now saying, there's a lot of it out there. How come it's not coming to me? Right? There's a lot of it out there, and it's looking for great places to invest. I'm sure that that's the reason that Bitcoin is so popular today. And none of you laughed about that. But if you're looking for a place to just dump money, dump it into Bitcoin. And I don't mean that because it's a good investment. It's probably not a good investment. But it is someplace you can just throw your money and everybody will think you are really smart if you do it, as long as Bitcoin keeps going up. Now, I haven't checked the price today. I know yesterday it was down a bunch. But I have friends who've invested in Bitcoin, and they think they are experts. They really think they're experts. And the reason that they tell me that they're experts is because I just have to look at how big their investments have grown over time. So the second rule that I want to tell you about money is that people with money and people who make money are not necessarily very smart. If you invested in Bitcoin and it went up, that's great. But I got news for you, it doesn't make you smart. And in fact, if you are smart, you'll probably sell your Bitcoin while it's up, so that when it goes down, you won't look as stupid as some of the other people that have invested when it was way at its top. In fact, it reminds me of the real estate catastrophe that we had several years ago. I think it was 2008. In the world today, people who are investing in Bitcoin really don't have a clue about what Bitcoin is. Well, yeah, they tell me it's blockchain technology, and it's the next coming. It's better than the internet. It's more important than a lot of things. And I get some of that stuff. But I also get that in the real estate boom right before 2008, there were dentists that were making money flipping houses. What do dentists know about investing in real estate? Probably nothing, as they found out in 2008 when they were left holding that real estate and it went down to a third of the value that it had. The same thing could happen with Bitcoin. But I'm not here to talk about Bitcoin. All I'm here to talk about is that money doesn't necessarily make you smart. And in fact, in many cases, when you get money, that money that you seek as an entrepreneur, as a founder, when you get that money, somehow that turns you stupid. So you take that money and you go out and you hire executives that cost a lot more money than those executives that you were trying to hire when you didn't have the money. And you buy really nice office furniture that's a lot better than those metal desks that you had when you didn't have the money. And you spend money on things that are not necessarily so smart as they used to be. So money doesn't necessarily make you smart and doesn't show that you're smart, but it could make you stupid. Valuations today, for a lot of the companies out there, are absolutely enormous. There are, last count that I had, 28 unicorns in the market. Everybody knows what a unicorn is from an investment point of view? $1 billion or more of value. Unicorns. They're called unicorns because they might be mythical. They might not really be worth that $1 billion, but in fact, there are 28 of them out there today. Those valuations are astronomical. For you as a founder, the valuations are always astronomical for somebody else's business. It's really unfortunate because when you go to get your valuation from the folks in the room here that are giving you that money, they're going to tell you your business isn't worth that much or isn't worth as much as you think it is. So valuations are always astronomical, but they're not astronomical for you. And as we said, money can make you stupid, but perhaps even worse than that, and as I said, I'm an equal opportunity disparager here today, but it's really true that there are people out there that are ready, willing, and able to give you money, and they think that they understand your business, and they don't necessarily understand your business, not nearly as well as you do. And the fact is that angel investors, venture capitalists, private equity investors, many of them actually think because they have money that they understand what your business is. And we joke about it a bunch, but there's this thing that happens when you are successful and get some money, and that is that you actually exceed your capabilities in terms of some of those markets that you understand. There was an example of a little company called Segway that pitched to Steve Jobs. And I don't know if you guys remember what Steve Jobs said about Segway. Does anybody remember that? Anybody old enough to remember that? Steve Jobs thought Segway was the greatest thing that he had ever seen. He thought it was just the answer to all of the problems that were going on in the personal transportation world. And in retrospect, it turns out Steve Jobs obviously was a very smart guy and a terrific entrepreneur, one of those magic founders. But the fact is, because he had that success, he also suffered from a bit of the hubris where he thought he actually understood markets that perhaps he didn't understand. In the case of Segway, he clearly didn't understand the reality of that market, or at least what became of the reality of that market. So money, I'm not saying Steve Jobs is stupid, but money can make you stupid. And perhaps most importantly, although we all as founders seek money, and we spend a lot of our time seeking money, it alone can't help your venture. If you've got a bad venture, raising a lot of money probably is not going to make it a great venture. So although we're all out there seeking money, be careful. It may actually make you stupider than you were before, and when you get it, it won't solve all your problems. So realize there's all these other problems, fundamental things that you need to think about in your startup business. Okay, so second, let's talk about something that's maybe a little bit more interesting than money, and that's management talent. So management talent for all of you that are starting companies, and for maybe some of you who are that management talent looking for your next great opportunity, management talent is hard to find. It is absolutely a seller's marketplace out there. If you've got the talent, you can actually sell yourself very, very well. It's hard to find. We entrepreneurs, when we're looking for talent, it's also always very scarce. Great founders, we talked about, they do magic. And as my screen shows right now, they at least believe that they're great managers, but the fact is, you can't see it very well, I'm sorry, but great founders don't always make great managers. So you'll see when we talk about a little bit later in the presentation, the idea of founders, where I can actually disparage founders a little bit at that point. What we'll find is great founders are great at some things, but not necessarily being great managers. So they need to attract the talent. And the great founders out there that really are able to scale their companies are the folks who find great people to serve with them. And in fact, you've heard this before, but many great companies are founded by people who say, I'm the stupidest one in the world, in the room, maybe because they raised some money. and the money made them stupid. But I'm the stupidest one in the room, but I hire great people to serve around me. And those are the people that actually get it, because ultimately it is about getting your entire management team together. So you may have seen the promo for this session today, and one of the things I said is that there is a very simple way to burn a great venture to the ground, and this is it. Hire family and friends. You know what happens when you hire family and friends into your company and they're not good at what they do? Do you know what happens? Nothing happens. And that's the problem. Nothing happens. They don't get fired, they don't lose their title, and they don't get pay decreases. You know why they don't get that? Because they're family. It's really hard to fire family. A lot of founders bring family and good friends into their companies because they can, because when they don't have money, they need the loyalty, and so they use that to help them bring people in. And some family and friends are really good. I have to, at least admit that. I've seen it happen before, but it's really, really hard when you bring family and friends into your venture if they're not very good at what they do, or if your venture grows past their capabilities to do anything about it. But that's what's worse about having family and friends in your venture, especially if they're not very good, is not that nothing happens to them and not that they take up space in your company. It's that the great performers in your company look around and say, this is not a meritocracy. Right? This is not a meritocracy. This is about who you know and what your bloodline is and who you're related to. And so therefore, performance doesn't really matter. And when that message gets sent to your great performers in your company, you lose. You lose as a founder, you lose as a management team, you lose as investors. So be smart about it. Family and friends is, in fact, the best way to burn a great venture to the ground. Technology. A lot of you are technologists. So of the founders in the audience, how many of you are technology background? Engineers, developers, software people? Bunch, not everybody, that's good. So technology is really, really important in the startup world these days. Many of the ventures, certainly many of the ventures coming from the West Coast, are technology ventures. But the fact is, it isn't about the technology. Engineers often actually dispute that with me. They say it is about the technology. And the fact is, this stuff is rocket science. This stuff is hard. The stuff that's being invented today is very technically astute. It's way past my capabilities as an engineer graduating many decades ago. This stuff is rocket science. But the fact is, nobody is buying technology for technology's sake. Right? We talk about nobody beats a path to your door if you build a better mousetrap. That's really the case with technology. So those of you who are technology founders, you need to get over that. You need to get over the fact that it isn't about the technology. You need to figure out what it is about. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when I disparage salespeople a little bit later. But technology has to solve a problem. And this is something that we talk about all the time, but oftentimes technology gets developed because it's so cool. Can you believe I can do this? That's what engineers say to me. And the answer is no, I can't believe it. This stuff is rocket science. I don't understand it. Seems pretty cool to me. But the real question is, does it solve any problems? Does it solve something that somebody will pay money for? Will enough people pay money for it to make it into a real business? And so when you get great technology, and you get great people, and you keep your family and friends out of it, now you got to figure out what to do with it, and marketing does matter. Now, a lot of engineers that I know, a lot of great engineers that I know, don't actually believe that marketing matters. They actually think that because their technology prowess is so great, that in fact that will shine through no matter what happens. And we're going to talk a little bit further about that when we get to the sales part of things. but it is all about marketing. You have to have a good enough technology that solves a real problem. You need to raise a sufficient amount of money so you can get it to market, and perhaps you can even market it and promote it. But the fact is, it's not just about technology. And although engineers sometimes say that they get it, oftentimes they fall back on what they're comfortable with, which is it is about the technology for them. So now let's move to sales and marketing. So if you're a technical founder, or even if you're not a technical founder, you're just a regular founder, somebody with a great idea, or somebody that can execute very well on what they do, one of the tasks that you're going to have to engage in is finding great sales candidates. Anybody ever hire a sales VP for their venture? A couple of you have. Anybody ever hire a real loser? I've done it a few times. I figured out why I hired a loser, or losers, because I did it several times. I figured out why I did it, and I figured out why I was so inclined to do it. And that's because salespeople give good interview. That's what they do. If they're good salespeople, they give good interview. Doesn't necessarily mean that they actually know how to sell anything, but they do that. And so what I find with great sales candidates is that they often will tell you, don't try this at home, I'm a professional, right? I got this down, especially if I'm a technical founder. They'll say to me, you know what, sales and marketing is very different than technology. You've listened to this talk from Trachtman, and he tells you it's not about the technology, it's about me, the sales guy. And I'm going to take you to the promised land. And the reason I'm going to take you to the promised land is I've been in this industry for years, and I've got a Rolodex of the right people to talk to. Rolodex. I've just dated myself. Oh. Dee Snider would be proud of me. Rolodex. Everybody know what a Rolodex is? Yeah, it's that thing that used to actually be a roll of contact cards that you used to keep your contacts in. Now you probably call it LinkedIn or something else like that. In any case, they tell you, great salespeople, I can't tell you how many times this has happened to me, and it happens today. Not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, it happens today, but salespeople will say to me, I can do this because I know all the people in the business. So here's a lesson that this is a great takeaway for those of you who are technology people in the audience or people that are not necessarily sales inclined. If you interview one of those people, run, don't walk. Run from them. That just means that at one point in their life, they were able to get a box full of cards with people's names on it, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be able to figure anything else out again. And they're going to live the rest of their careers on that. Some salespeople actually do pretty well the rest of their careers just with that box of Rolodex cards. But be careful about that. It isn't about the past when you hire a salesperson. It's about how they can help you get to the future. It's about managing a sales team, and it's about scaling sales. And those same people who talk about, don't try this at home, I'm a professional, I know all these people, when you ask them why they're good at what they do, they say, because I'm a people person. Right? Isn't that what they tell you? I can talk to anybody. I can sell snow to an Eskimo. I can do all this stuff because that's what I do. This isn't about technology. Remember what Les told you. It's about how you market and sell these things. And in fact, I know how to do that. So lesson number 2 in building and hiring a sales team is this is a science. It is not an art. Sales is not an art. Sales is not about personalities. Sales is about executing. Sales is a contact sport. It's about making the contacts. It's about walking things through a pipeline, and it's about getting confirmations from your customers. One of the things that happens all the time when you do a strat meeting, a sales strat meeting, any of you ever held a sales strat meeting where you go through with your salespeople on where their pipeline is at a certain time? So the first thing that happens is you say, okay, so how are you doing? He says, wow, my pipeline's great. I've got enough in there to be able to make my quota for this period of time. That's terrific. And you pick out one of the prospects, perhaps one of the most important prospects in there, a big one, for example, And you say, okay, where is this person, this entity, in the sales cycle? The first phrase out of every salesperson's mouth, especially the ones that are lying, is, anybody know? I think, ... That's what it is. It's I think. And guess what? It doesn't matter what your salesperson thinks. It only matters what the prospect thinks. So how do we get from what the salesperson thinks to what the prospect actually believes? So how do we get to that? And in the world of startups and early stage companies, the way you get to that, in my world, is a confirmation. And a confirmation is, go ask the prospect. I don't mean that you as the founder or you as the CEO or you as an executive have to go ask every prospect where they are, but I do mean that you need to have your salespeople actually get confirmations from your prospects as to where they are. The way we do it in our company is really simple, is we send a follow-up note to a prospect, no matter what stage they're in of the sales cycle, and we say, as a salesperson, here's what we believe we heard. Would you please tell me whether I'm right or wrong, or whether I got it all, or whether there's something missing from that? We call that a plan letter or a confirmation. And when we get that back from the prospect, a couple things happen. So one is, if the prospect doesn't respond at all, there's probably a problem. Probably they don't have the rapport that they thought they had, or that they told you that they had. So that's one. Two is, they get something back from the prospect, and the prospect says, yep, that's right. You got it exactly right. So the first scenario that I gave you is not such a great one, right? So the prospect doesn't respond, so you kind of don't know now. That confirmation didn't happen. The second one is pretty good. And you'll say, well, wait a minute, Les, why isn't that really good? And that's because it's really easy for a salesperson to gain rapport, many salespeople gain rapport with a prospect. And in fact, to have the prospect say, yep. In fact, in the United States, as opposed to some countries, but in the United States, people tend, despite what happens in Washington, D.C., people tend to try to be nice to salespeople. And so the salesperson says, are you interested in what I'm selling? And the prospect goes, oh, yeah, right? That's kind of like the same thing that happens when a founder goes to a venture capitalist and says, so is this something that meets your investment criteria? And the investor says, oh, yeah. You're still that far away from getting the money. That's how far you are from getting the sale, even when the prospect says that. So people tend to not like to turn down salespeople. They don't like to buy necessarily things that they don't want or don't need, but they tend not to like to turn down salespeople. So scenario number 2 is pretty good, but it's not great. Scenario number 3 in my world is the great one. And that's when a prospect says, you actually didn't get it exactly right. And they tell you what you got wrong. In that case, you have a prospect who's engaged. That prospect is involved in their own sales cycle. And it sounds like they're actually thinking about what's going on. So we try to get rid of happy ears, as I call it, for salespeople, have them hear what they want to hear, and happy ears for you as a manager, which is hearing that the pipeline is big enough that it's going to solve your needs for the period of time. But in fact, the best of all is when somebody poses for you at least an objection or a clarification of where you are. Oops, went the wrong direction. Okay, so now we get to founders. Founders is something very near and dear to my heart, as you all know from the title of my book. And our goal is to optimize founders' capabilities. And again, I started out by saying that founders, you all in the audience that are founders, you're the magic. You make things happen that could not happen otherwise. And in fact, I think it's what makes the United States great, what makes capitalism in our world work really well, and that's the innovation process, which you all should be very proud of being part of that. It's important. But again, realizing that founders aren't necessarily the people to necessarily take their ventures over the finish line. So what we have to do is we have to help our founders get to where they need to be, and that is we need to provide them with the capabilities that go above and beyond the things that they're capable of doing on their own. Now, founders are the guys or girls who typically have the pocketbook that can give you equity. And most of you who are founders know that you began this game at least partially to make money. And the money that you're going to make is likely not going to happen in terms of just the salary that you get. You could probably earn that or more elsewhere by working for somebody else. So equity is this magic thing that founders certainly are seeking. The problem with that is there's only 100% of the pie that can be divided up. And oftentimes founders like to think that there's more than 100% of the pie, and they tend to make promises to executives and to people in their audience and their constituents that might actually exceed the 100% number. So we've got to be a little bit careful. We've got to help these founders understand that equity is important, but it also has got to be realistic as well. And one of the things that we found about founders, and investors know this very, very well, and that's that when you invest in a company with a founder, the first thing you need to know as an investor is what's the founder in it for? And there's a friend of mine, actually I'll be down at USC next week, a gentleman by the name of Noam Wasserman, who studies founders from an academic point of view, and what he coined was the term rich or king, or rich or royal. And by that, what he means is that every founder has to make that determination, that heartfelt determination. Are they in it because they want to be kings of their world, or are they in it because they want to be rich? And for those of you who are founders in companies today, you probably think you know the answer to that question. So if I, as an investor, want to invest in your company, what do you tell me? Which is it? You want to be rich or king? Rich, right? Rich? Anybody think it's king? You want to be king? Okay. We'll make you king then. That's at least honest. In any case, what happens is venture capitalists come in, private equity investors come in, angel investors come in, they say to the founder, okay, it's not about you, it's not about your technology, it's about this management team, we're going to grow this great technology together, we're going to find some really good salespeople to help us sell it, and when that happens, you may not be the person to bring it over the finish line. What do you think about that? And almost every founder to the person says, fine with me, I'm in it to get rich. Almost every founder to the person is lying when they say that. Almost everyone is. But you as a founder have to really make that decision. And it's a tough decision to make if you're pushed for one or the other. Which is it that you're going to do? And if you decide you want to be king, that's just fine. Don't take other people's money. Because you know what happens when you take other people's money? They tell you what to do. When you take other people's money, you give up control. And when you give up control, you can be sure that you will not be the person who makes that determination as to whether you are king or queen anymore. Now, you may end up being that person, and that would be great. And there are people that have done it. You guys have all read the press, and you know all the big names in the technology business that have made that happen. But the fact is, once you take other people's money, certainly once you give up control by taking other people's money, you no longer get to make that decision. So you have made that decision, and that decision is rich. If you go back on that decision later, you will fail. And as Noam Wasserman's research tells us, it's the old Confucius statement, which is, he who chases two rabbits catches neither. If you want to be both rich and king, you will likely end up with neither. And the research actually plays that out. So you got to be careful about that. You got to make that decision early on. And as a founder, if you decide that rich is your answer, you need to think about who and what and how you're going to determine who your successor is. That's somebody who I've been 6 times. It's not an easy thing to be from a successor point of view, and it's definitely not an easy thing to be from a founder point of view. In fact, the title of my book came from a succession that I did, not the last one, but the one before that I did, where a founder of a very successful company handed me the keys to the kingdom as successor. And he was great because he did this voluntarily. He had never given up control. He just decided that he was not the right guy to move it to the next stage. He hired me to come in. I'd known him for a bunch of years. He hired me to come in, gave me the keys to the kingdom, and his first statement to me when he did that was, Les, whatever you do, don't F it up. That's what he said to me. And when he said that to me, I knew him pretty well. I kind of let it slide off my back. This was my 5th time that I was doing it. Yes?
I'm sorry, Pastor, but did you?
We'll wait on that. That's the punchline. Actually, to be honest, I've done it 6 times. Twice I effed it up out of 6 times. If I was a baseball player, I'd be in the Hall of Fame for that. But I effed it up twice.
You're right. Sometimes, you wrote a book, so sometimes your best experience or knowledge comes from actually what happened. So that's the reason I asked the question.
Yeah, it's a fair question, and there's a lot to be said for learning from mistakes. I'd much prefer to learn from successes than mistakes. And I try to be a very keen observer, as I said, so I do that because the mistakes hurt a lot. And if you read the book, you'll see that it's not so much fun making those mistakes. And you're playing with people's lives and playing with a lot of their wealth in the case of these founders. So you do have to be sensitive to it. But that's what he said to me, don't F it up. Now, there's an interesting piece that goes along with that, and I'll only spend a minute or two on that, although it is really the topic of my book. And that's that when somebody says don't F it up to you, in whatever the capacity is that's said to you, and if somebody didn't say it to you, they probably felt it when they gave you responsibility, when they promoted you, when they gave you their money to invest, if you're an investor, they probably were thinking deep down inside, here it is, but don't F it up. The fact is that we all, as entrepreneurs, we all as innovators, we all as people that are trying to grow wealth, have to realize that unless we are willing to F it up, or at least unless we're willing to take the chance that, in fact, the change might F it up, we're never going to make any progress. There's a long list of companies that have not been willing to F it up, that have gone down the drain. Many of them household names, Kodak, Digital Equipment Corporation. There's lots and lots of them. Some of them are happening today as we speak. But the fact is that those folks rested on their laurels and they said, you know what? We're okay where we are. Kodak said, right? We don't want to mess with this thing called digital photography. Even though we invented it, we don't want to mess with it because it'll ruin the Kodachrome franchise, right? It did. It ruined the Kodachrome franchise completely. So we have to be willing to F it up, and that's one of the things that we learn in the founders world is that although founders sometimes have to hand off the baton to somebody else, they also have to be willing to at least let that happen. A lot of times we talk about quality of life, especially with more of the younger people that are entering into the workplace today. And God love them, they are our future, and many of them are extremely capable. Certainly they're much smarter than me, and they didn't have nearly as long hair as I did when they grew up in high school. But they all talk about quality of life. And I, as an old curmudgeon, believe that quality of life is really, really important. But there is no such thing in today's world as a work-life balance. If I hear work-life balance one more time, I'm literally going to throw up. It's not a pretty scene. There is no work-life balance. And what I mean by that is I don't mean that you should be working all the time or that you should not be working all the time. What I mean is you got to integrate this stuff into what you do. We live in a 24/7 world. Right? Up until I got here today, I was doing email and responding and talking to people in my company on the phone. But I'm here to do this presentation today. I should have left that out of my brain. I should have been way more prepared for this presentation than I am because of that. I should have done a lot of other things. But in fact, we live in a 24/7 world, and you will always be on call. If you're a real important person in any venture, founder, executive, investor, board member, what have you, you're on call all the time. So you need to figure out how to separate those so that they work for you. There's a few lessons in here that are really important that I talk to young people, my kids, people in the companies that I work with, and that's that it goes like this. If you hate your job, doing less of it will not make you feel any better. It just won't. So find a job you love and work at it as you can build it between what you do in the other parts of your day, which is live your life. Control your own destiny. So figure out a way so that you can be an important part of what you do, but that you can have that time that you need for yourself. We talk about in our company the fact that there are going to be times when you need a plumber to come to your house because your sink is leaking and it's the middle of a business day. That's going to happen, and that's okay. Just remember that when my company's pipes are broken, I'm going to call you in the middle of the night to come and help me do that as well. That's the give and take that goes along with it. So just make sure you've got that understanding and that balance, and that you, in fact, do control your own destiny. Realize that this is about prioritization, realizing that not everything is important. I actually have built a successor into my current company, and one of the things I say to him all the time, because he works his tail off. I got an email from him at 3 o'clock in the morning this morning. I wasn't awake when I got it, but I got it at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I say to him the same thing all the time, which is you got to prioritize. There are some things you simply have to let burn to the ground and not deal with. That's part of what you have to do to get this, we won't call it work-life balance, but to get this integration into what you do. So prioritizing is really important. Risk is the last topic that we'll talk about, and then I'll stop and you can ask me questions or you can disparage me or whatever you'd like to do about it. The whole entrepreneurial world, all of innovation is about risk, and it's about a risk-reward relationship. That's a risk-reward relationship with your investment. That's a risk-reward relationship with the amount of effort you're going to put into something. And it's a risk-reward relationship with what you're giving up, your opportunity costs, to join the venture or start the venture that you're dealing with. People that enter into early-stage companies have to realize that there's a massive trade-off between short-term and long-term. The long-term has to be what you're focused on. The short-term can't be what you're focused on. The problem with that is most of our bills in life are short-term, and we have to pay those bills. So what you have to figure out, part of that integration in your life, is can you afford to be in an early-stage company? Can you afford to have low salary or no salary with the anticipation that someday you're going to earn the big bucks? You're going to get a nice equity event that occurs. Can you afford to do that? And what we find is there's a lot of stress in the world of entrepreneurs where we get people, either ourselves or people in our companies, who actually don't get that balance right. Where they have short-term bills that they have to pay, but they're playing for the long run. And they talk about that. They talk about the fact that they are in it for the long run, that they really don't care about short-term earnings, and they're willing to give up salary for that. You got to make sure that they are comfortable with whatever that level that is. And if you're an executive or you're a founder in a company, you got to make sure these people that join your company can afford to be in your company. Now, maybe you're one of those well-heeled unicorns, right? You can, because you've got all this money, you can pay them all these gobs of money that they don't deserve, or maybe they do deserve. But in any case, you've got to make sure that the people you bring into your ventures have that comfort zone. There's a lot of stuff that's been written these days about how older entrepreneurs, and I'm happy to see that there are at least a few people in the audience that have some gray hair, but how older entrepreneurs perhaps are even better at what they do than the younger entrepreneurs are, right? We used to think that the best entrepreneurs were ones that got out of school. They had nothing to lose, so they took these big risks and created these ventures, and they skyrocketed, and that was wonderful. But now we're finding that there are some older entrepreneurs who actually have gotten to that point in their life where they've actually banked a little bit of money. They no longer have kids at home that they have to subsidize, and they actually are able to take less cash dollars in return for some longer-term thing. So just make sure that people, that you as a founder or you as an executive in a company or you as an employee, find your own comfort level with that. People are the key to everything. As you go through this, as you build your companies, you got to choose people carefully. Nobody wants to work with assholes, right? There's a book with that title, right? I'm allowed to use those bad words because I put it on my title. Nobody wants to work with assholes. But guess what? Every asshole wants to work with you. How the heck did that happen? So be careful who you bring into your company. There is a category of employee, and some of these employees are quite talented. Some of them are expert technologists. Some of them are irreplaceable for what they know, but they are impossible to work with. We call those talented terrors in the companies. And we are all, as company founders, as executives, we're all reluctant to fire them or get rid of them, right? They have institutional knowledge. They're uniquely capable of doing the things they need to do. And we keep them in our companies. And you know what they do? They F it up. They F it up. Not because they do a bad job, but because they piss off everybody around them. They suck energy out of the room. They realize they take away from the value of the overall entity in return for their special expertise. Those are the assholes who want to work with you. Be careful of those people. I'd rather hire people that are not nearly as talented, but who are team players, than those assholes. Good people rule. It's really hard to find good people. Find those good people, nurture those good people, and make sure that you take care of them. Make sure that you can integrate their lives into what you have in your company. Make sure they can afford to do what they do, and make sure that you give them the opportunity to come in your company and F it up. That's it for the prepared part of my remarks. I'm happy to take any questions. I'm happy to take any criticism. I'm happy to talk about the weather. I'm happy to talk about, I don't want to talk about the White House. Let's talk about other things. Any questions? Comments? Ideas? Dennis.
So a small little logistic item. We are recording, so if you don't mind coming up to one of the mics, or we can walk around with the mics. Just speak clearly so everyone can hear, and then he'll be able to address it, I'm sure, quite well. We have a first question?
From here, Dennis.
Thanks, Les. You have a chapter in your book called, I think, Slow Down to Speed Up, something like that.
Slow down to speed up.
Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, a lot of this is about being thoughtful about what you do as opposed to heading headstrong into something. It's kind of like that email that you write really quickly and press the send button and send it out. I did one of those once in my career. It actually was to a founder. I didn't stay in that job very long. That was one of the ones that didn't succeed. But it's being thoughtful about it. So one of the things that you need to do is you need to slow yourself down. There's a great book called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow that has this concept in it. But you need to slow down and think through the repercussions of some of the things that you're doing. And you need to make sure that you're thoughtful about it as opposed to just reacting. There are plenty of situations. The fight or flight scenario that you'll encounter in business where you have to make a snap judgment and you have to make a decision, those are different than the slow down to speed up. So I think that's the general point that I was trying to make there. Thanks, Dennis, for that question. Other questions? Yes.
So Les, you made a very important point about the sales guys, and when you hire them, they're the good interviewers, and then you find out they're not really a good performer. And I used to be like you also in private enterprises for several years, and I have similar experience. So do you have any tip that how do you, flag a bullshitter, to use your term, or it's a little bit less...
That's a scientific term.
...less controversial than your book. So how do you be as artist versus the performer in an interview situation where you can basically select the right sales guys? Because it's very important what you say.
So that's a great question. If I had the answer to that question, I probably wouldn't be standing up here. I'd be counting my money somewhere else because it's a really hard thing to answer. So there's a couple of things that we do to try to make that happen. So first off, I use every opportunity I can to try to get a touch with that person. So one is we do standardized testing of all of our candidates. So we do standardized testing of our sales candidates, both from a personality point of view and from a capabilities point of view. So it's intelligence testing, if you will. I don't hide from the fact that I like to hire above average intelligent people in every role, including sales. So that's one. And you'd be surprised sometimes. I just had a candidate for a role, for this kind of role in my company. Person had a great resume. It was like one of these where I read the resume and I'm going, oh, I can't wait to interview this person. And we have a rule that says we don't even talk to them until they do this profile, this assessment. And I got the assessment back, and it was, well, I used to live in the South, so I can say dumber than a mud fence. Does anyone know what dumber than a mud fence is? This person was dumber than a mud fence. And in this case, it was a she. She might have been great at what she did, but I couldn't hire her because she didn't reach the level of intelligence that I need her to be, because I think sales is about thinking on your feet. And I think it's being able to respond to it. So that's one. Two is I try to get people out of context, right? So salespeople are really good at interviews because that's what they do all day. So what I try to do is get them out of an interview scenario. So one is take them bowling, right? Most salespeople are not good bowlers. Who would have thunk it? If it's not a salesperson, I'll take them golfing. But salespeople often are good golfers, so I don't like taking them golfing. So I like to get them out of context. I like to get them in something they were uncomfortable with and see how they react. Because that's going to tell you a lot more about their personality than just interviewing them and having them be prepared for what they do. So it's things like that, but it's lots of touches. I do have one secret weapon. The one secret weapon that I have is my wife, and she's really good. If I have a candidate that I'm ready to hire into a senior level sales position, I will always take that person. If they have a spouse, I'll take them to dinner with my spouse and their spouse, and we'll just have a conversation. And it's amazing what my wife can figure out of these people about bullshit that they can come up with. So realistically, if you go to dinner with an executive spouse and you tend to talk about yourself all night long, the likelihood is you're probably full of it. And so that happens. And I've had 2 or 3 since the times that I've hired all the bad ones. I've had 2 or 3 that my wife just nixed, and she told me exactly why, and she was just dead right. It was like, wow, why didn't I think of that? So it's just find ways to get around the performance scenario, at least in my mind. Other questions? Yes, there's some in the back.
I would like to ask, do you have any tips for how to attract venture capital investors to your startup? As in how you mentioned how money is so abundant. How do you entice people to invest in your startup if you don't have any background?
Yeah, so it's the age-old question, right? How do you find money? How do you attract money? How do you attract capital? And I have some trite answers that I can give you, but realistically, the most important thing I believe, and I do some angel investing myself, but the most important thing that I look for in somebody running a company is obviously they got to have a good idea. It's got to be something that I can actually know something about, so I don't get the hubris of the Steve Jobs with the Segway. So it has to be something I know something about so I can form an opinion that I think is intelligent about it. So you want to find somebody who knows something about your industry space. But second, you've got to exhibit that you understand your business, innately understand your business. The investor will never understand the business like you, but they can figure out if you don't understand your own business. So know your business, know what's in there. You have a great idea, know your business, and then be able to point out to them that, in fact, they can make money by investing in your company, right? So we forget that. But there is a little-known fact that investors actually try to make money when they invest in your company. They don't give you money because they like you. They don't give you money because they like your venture, and they don't give you money because they like your technology. They give you money because they're going to make money. And so show them how they're going to make money. And as much as you can give them that path, and as many steps as you can give them along the way, will get you a lot closer to the investment. There's no magic in investing. It's all about making sure you can provide that pathway to the investor. Another question here.
Yeah, your presentation spoke really poignantly to my experience as a startup founder, raising money, investors, running that startup, all of that. So thank you. And I'm sure it's validating for everybody, I should say many people in here. What do you think about the role of a CFO in an early stage startup, say the first few years? Or maybe moving into that sort of second phase?
So CFO, the question of a CFO in an early stage venture is a really important one, I think. There's a couple things that I would say. One is, as a founder, if finance is not your strong suit, you're going to need one earlier rather than later, and you need one at a little higher level rather than a little lower level. So if finance is not your strong suit, think about that. But even if finance is your strong suit, one of the things that I love to do with CFO candidates is hire them as controllers or something below CFO and have them show me how they can both earn their way into the CFO role, but more importantly, bring my company to the point where a CFO is really needed. So there's that nice growth path that goes along with it. I've done that 3 times, actually, and those were the 3 best CFOs that I've ever had. People that were willing to prove that they could do what they did, what they were good at doing, but they could also make sure they could elevate my company to do that. Does that get you somewhat close to where you want to be? Okay. Yep. Yes.
So we've got time for one more question. We've got one back here, and then you're willing to stick around for a few extra minutes?
I'll stick around for a few minutes, answer some questions, and of course, we got to do the book drawing before you
I got
leave.
the
Okay,
sheets
good.
for you.
So you talked about the difference between looking for short-term cash compensation versus long-term equity compensation.
Yep.
What are you looking for in your 7th role?
What am I looking for?
In your 7th role as a second CEO?
It's my 6th role, but
The next one.
my next one. I only have 2 or 3 left. So I'm completely long-term oriented now because I can. It's a nice place to be. I'm older. I've put away some money. I've had a few successes along the way. Had a few failures along the way too. But for me, it's all about where this thing goes. And maybe even more importantly, it's actually not about the money. So although money is always good and it's a great way to measure success, for me, it's more about impact. I mean, one of the reasons I wrote this book was not to make money off of selling the book, but I get to stand in front of audiences like you and actually maybe provide you with a few pieces of knowledge or wisdom, as I call it, that you can take away with you. So for me, it's about the long term. It is about the impact, and then measured by money is what I would say.
All right, well, I think it's pretty obvious you've got plenty of wisdom to be sharing, so thank you for writing the book, and thank you for this. Why don't we give him a quick round of applause. Thank you, Les, for all of your work. Excellent job. So we have got a listing here of the people who checked in, so if you didn't check in, too late. 87 people here, so what I'd like to do is see if we could have somebody in the audience call out a number between 1 and 87. 34. 34. David Ochi wins. Yay! Oh. Audit. Startups, we don't do audits. All right, 34 you said, right? Looks like Simon Pang. Is Simon Pang here? Congratulations, Simon. Come on up. Grab your book. Come on, give her a round of applause. She won a random drawing. That's an accomplishment.
Congratulations.
Excellent.
I'll be happy to sign that afterwards as well.
Simon, he's happy to sign it after you're done. Would you mind giving us the next number, Simon? 56. You're going to page 2. Tony Package. Tony Package in the back there. Come on up, Tony. Tony's our second lucky winner. You win a $2 million investment into your startup.
Yeah, my pleasure.
For 100% equity.
Oh, there you go.
Congratulations. All righty, so thank you everybody for being here. Again, Les is willing to hang out and chat some more. Thank you for coming. Thank you to Stradling for the sponsorship, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.